Hey there, everybody. This is TroyBoy17 coming to you live from my house. I'm under a blanket. Today, I kind of want to talk about something a little bit different, a little bit unwarranted, not very relevant. Today, I wanted to talk about growth in comics, character growth, and the importance of it. And specifically, I wanted to talk about the character Spider-Man and why I think he needs to be a father. In main 616 canon, he needs to have a daughter, and the character needs to grow to that point. I talked a little bit about it on Twitter, but like always, it starts on Twitter and it grows and it gets more and more crazy. So before we talk about Spider-Man in the future and where the direction that I think Marvel should go, we gotta pull Samurai Jack and go back to the past and talk about something called One More Day. If you're subscribed to me, you probably know what One More Day is. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you probably know what it is. Most people do. It's infamous in every sense of the word. It's probably one of the most hated comic things to ever happen. I'm sure there are going to be people in the comments saying, no, I love One More Day. No, you don't. So if you don't know what One More Day is, One More Day was basically this event storyline thing for Spider-Man, which is crazy. It's insane. I won't go too into detail with the actual stuff that happens because I don't really want to, but long story short, Peter was married to MJ and she was pregnant. She was gonna have a baby, and Aunt May had been diagnosed with cancer, I believe, and she was dying. And Peter, in a last-ditch effort to save his aunt, he goes to Mephisto, who is basically Satan. He goes to Mephisto and he sells his soul, basically. He trades his soul to save Aunt May, and yada yada yada. Long story, crazy, stupid story short. The story ends with Aunt May being still alive, Peter and MJ broken up, the baby gone. And basically what it did was it had taken all of the decisions that the writers had made in the past, and it reverted them back to status quo, back to what you would think of when you think of Spider-Man. The reason that bothers me and a lot of other fans is growth for characters is integral. It's integral to stories. It's integral to so many things, especially these long-form stories. Specifically in Marvel Comics, one thing about Marvel, which is different from DC, which I'll talk about DC and what they do, but one thing that makes Marvel different from DC is that Marvel has never, aside from One More Day, which even then that doesn't really count, Marvel has never done a full universe reset. Basically, everything that has happened in Marvel Comics is canon. Like the 60s comics from Stan Lee up until it's all in canon. So if you're reading a Marvel comic now, those characters will remember what was happening in the 60s and the 50s and all that. Compare that to DC, who has had all these events and these crises, and all these different events that will reset the universe, reset the timeline, basically. And the reason that they do that is for sales, to get new readers on board, because for a new reader, you see a comic universe that has 50 years, 20 years, any amount of past, and you want to jump in, and it's hard, it's scary, it's very, very difficult. That's why a lot of people have trouble hopping into Spider-Man comics. There's no easy way to start from the beginning and get to the end in main 616 canon. That's why Ultimate Comics was so successful, because that was a starting off point for a lot of people and a lot of readers. And so that's why DC keeps doing the reboots. When I first started reading comics, I started reading continuously during Rebirth era DC, also known as the best era for DC. I had started reading in the New 52, but Rebirth was where I really started going, because Rebirth was so good. I miss Rebirth so much. I was initially against this whole one continuous timeline, one continuous universe, basically because as a new reader, again, like I said, it's harder to jump into that, and I had so much trouble with it that I wasn't reading Spider-Man at the time, and I really wanted to, but I couldn't get into it because of all that history and all that past, and it made it difficult. But now that I've been reading for like 5-6 years now, DC, the rumor right now, it's not official, it's not confirmed, but the big rumor right now is there's going to be another crisis and they're going to do another reset. That's very frustrating as a reader, because you spend 5-6 years reading these characters and just out of nowhere reset back to status quo. You know, I look at Batman's run, the Tom King Batman run, which I admit I have not finished. I'm very far behind on it. The main thing that I really liked about the Tom King Batman run was the fact that he was willing to let Batman grow. He was willing to let Batman move past the dead parent aspect and become a more healthy individual and grow and all that stuff that I really, really liked. And I loved that aspect of that run. Other aspects, not so much, and it's a very controversial opinion, but just that one mindset that Tom King had when it came to the character, that I loved that, and that was my favorite part about it, and that's why I like it so much. And so that's why I was super, super on board with the wedding between Batman and Catwoman. Like I said, I'm behind, and I don't really know for sure what's going on, but from what it sounds like, it really sounds like DC is very against growth. I have my own theories about why, and I have my own theories about why Tom King was basically kicked off the book. People say it was because of sales. I think it was because, like I said, DC struggles to allow their characters to grow. My favorite characters in DC, flat out, it's not Black Canary, it's not Green Arrow, as much as I love them, as much as you'd probably think they are my favorite characters. My favorite character in DC is Nightwing, is Dick Grayson Nightwing, because that right there, his whole story, if you follow him from start to finish, you see a change, you see a growth. You know, he starts as Robin, he starts as this boy wonder, and then he grows and he becomes an adult and he sees how problematic Batman is, and he moves on, he becomes his own individual, and he leads the Teen Titans, and then he becomes Nightwing, he becomes his own thing, and then he fakes his death and becomes a spiral agent, and that's a whole other chapter of his life. And it's like, let's not talk about Rick, the Rick Grayson stuff, because that's bad. That's bad growth, that's a whole other thing about stupid growth versus good growth. But when you follow characters who have their own natural growth and have their own natural story and path, it's like you're watching a real person, and it's like you're watching a real life unfold. And that's really all storytelling is. Storytelling is you're peeking into other lives. But when things keep returning to a status quo, and things keep returning to their own thing, then it's like you're watching the same day over and over again. You're watching the same person live out the same thing with nothing really new. You know, Batman's gonna sit in his cave alone and mope, and then he's gonna go fight a villain and beat the villain and come back and keep moping, and just all that stuff. And it's like, it's so limited. It's not engaging, you know? And when you have these characters who are supposed to be around and supposed to exist for decades and decades and decades, it's difficult. It's very difficult to continue to be engaged and enthralled with the character when there's no growth. This was a long-winded way of saying that Spider-Man is doing a really good job right now. Nick Spencer's Spider-Man run, again, I'm behind on it. I'm very behind on it, but from what I understand, not a ton has changed since I've been reading, because they've been doing their own events and stuff. But Nick Spencer is doing an amazing job with Spider-Man, because what it seems like he's doing, and I have my own theories and stuff, but it seems like the direction that Nick Spencer is going is he wants to undo One More Day. He wants to allow One More Day to he wants to allow the character to grow and change again. Peter and MJ are back together, which that's a huge deal, and there's talks about engagement and marriage, and this character Kindred, this new villain who's super, super scary, and I have my own theories about who he is, which I won't get into. It all seems so connected to One More Day. It all seems so connected to moving on, and it's all connected to letting Spider-Man grow up and allowing him to be an adult for once. And I think that's super, super important. And I think from my assumption and from how I'm feeling about, and I'm totally biased because this is what I want, but I feel like Nick Spencer is gonna go in the direction of making Spider-Man a parent. Peter Parker really needs that to get over this sort of teenager, college student aspect of life and allow him to become a real adult. And that's, I think that's why Life Story, Spider-Man Life Story, was so successful. You're allowed to see Spider-Man throughout his entire life, which, like, there are other reasons why that story is so cool. It's a really, really good story. I totally recommend it if you haven't read it. But I think that's a big reason of why I liked it, because you saw the character grow, you saw it change in depth, and I think Spider-Man becoming a parent and becoming a father is that change and is that development that the character really needs. And so the reason why I think the character needs it is because at the end of the day, I mean, I talked about this so much, Spider-Man is based on relatable issues that everybody struggles with. And I think everybody knows that being a dad is hard as fuck, but it's a very, very real thing that people go through and real people struggle with. But the storyline, Renew Your Vows, the alternate universe story, I think that's why that's so successful. I think people know that that's what the character needs to get to, and you know, you may not be willing to admit it, but as an experienced comic reader, I think most people, if they had a choice between reading Status Quo, teenager Spider-Man living with his aunt, or Spider-Man as a father, they would absolutely go with Renew Your Vows. And that's why I loved that story so mumuch. In terms of the actual Renew Your Vows story, I wasn't too big on like what was going on. You know, I couldn't really get into it, and especially they made that big 8-year time jump. It just skipped a lot of development, and I wasn't a big fan of that. But I stuck with it because I really liked the idea. I liked seeing Spider-Man as a dad and as a husband, and that's insanely important. That's more important than anything that could be happening in the story. That's more important than any big comic events with 2099 or Carnage or whatever, none of that. The thing that's most important to me is allowing the character to develop and grow, and that's why I love Renew Your Vows so much, and that's why I think that you should make that canon. Make that concept canon and allow the character to become more. So, yeah, it's just, Peter needs to grow up. Peter needs to be the adult Spider-Man. You know, he was the first Spider-Man. I think he needs to be basically the dad of this growing spider family, you know? Like Barry Allen with the Flash and with the Flash family. Peter needs to grow up, and I think you can give that young teenager, college student aspect to Miles. Because honestly, when you think about it, Miles is going to keep getting older. If Peter stays the same, Peter stays the same age, then Miles is gonna get to the same point as Peter, and they're gonna be telling the same stories. If they're the same age and the same setup and same everything, then there's no point. There's no point in having two, you know? Each character has to be a different aspect and represent something, and I think Miles should be the younger young man college student, and I think Peter needs to be the adult. It is absolutely necessary for the character of Spider-Man and for the legacy of Spider-Man for him to grow and change, because that's the most important part about this character. We saw him graduate high school and graduate college and do all this stuff, and I think that is incredibly important. And I cannot fathom a world where we go back to status quo again. We go back to Peter being a teenager, high schooler. I cannot fathom that, because to me, that would be the death of the character. Just stagnating all this growth and all this change, because that would just be insulting as a And with that said, that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm having some issues with YouTube not putting my videos in people's subscription feeds, so be sure to ring that little bell icon so you don't miss any future updates. I have a lot of really fun things planned that I'm really excited to share with you guys, so be sure not to miss out on that. But anyway, this has been TroyBoy17 coming at you live. Remember to stay inside and wash your hands and be safe, and I will see you around.